Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Ready to go ahead and get started then?
Yeah.
Alright. Well, hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentleman Comedy Month. I'm Sid Partu. Joining me today is Ruben DeBoard, the Comics Kid 2099. Hello.
Hello.
It's just Ruben and I. We're roughing it out on our own. Ruben, I think this is the first full episode you and I will do just together, so we'll see how this goes.
We did do Selma together.
Oh, you're right. Okay, yeah, you're right. Never mind. I'm stupid. I'm forgetful. Anyway, so Ruben, you picked our topic tonight as we continue Comedy Month, and what is it that we're discussing tonight?
In a broad sense, we are discussing the evolution of sitcoms. For me, mostly this is going to be from the 90s up until today, since I don't think I've ever watched a sitcom from before the 90s. But specifically, if we start to want to hone in on a specific area, I was thinking about how laugh track sitcoms seem to be dying out nowadays, and they're more the exception to the rule rather than like just the rule itself. But just the evolution of sitcoms over the last 20, 25 years is kind of what I was thinking about.
You know, you mentioned the laugh track thing, and I think that's an interesting place to start. And you're gonna have to forgive me, also you, Ruben, but the people at home listening, as you hear me type and look something up. Which I'm really bad at being able to split my attention like this. But anyway, laugh tracks were created because an actress on a sitcom had a stalker.
Huh.
And so she didn't want the live studio audience there. And so they hired extras and everything like that. The history of the sitcom laugh track. They hired extras and everything because they didn't want her to feel threatened by the stalker. And so they brought in actors and extras to do the laughing for, like, to edit in later. And it's interesting that that's kind of the history of how it was created.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Was that like back in the 50s maybe?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. At least that's the version of the story I heard. I can't be 100%. Maybe it's the Mary Tyler Moore Show? I don't know. I can't be 100% about it because I don't remember like all the history. I just remember hearing that story, I think on an episode of like Radio Lab or something.
Right.
Let me just try Laugh Track Radio Lab and see what happens.
And also I should point out, like, if I'm watching a show, like some shows will say this show is filmed before a live studio audience, and then sometimes it won't be, but they will still put that canned laughter in there, and I can't usually tell the difference. Like, for me, it all sounds the same. If you have a show like Full House, for all I know, there may be a wall that's cut out, and there may be a studio full of people laughing that, you know, Danny Tanner can look and see, or it may be like How I Met Your Mother, where it's not really, you know, you can just do a full 360-degree tilt on your camera, and there's no people there, but then they just insert the laughter later. And for me, it ultimately amounts to about the same thing, where sometimes I'll even say most of the time I don't think that the laugh track is even necessary. I think it boils down to, at least now when you see it used, it comes down to someone somewhere thinks that, the audience isn't smart enough to know when to laugh. So they need to be told, this is a funny thing that's happening, or this is a funny thing that's being said, so you need to laugh right now, so that everyone else watching at home will understand that this is funny. And then, like, you know, that's kind of where I feel like it may have started with, like, the soccer thing, and then I feel like it evolved into, like, we can use it in this way. But I feel like nowadays, I'm not sure if I would say that studios have more faith in the audience, but it seems like there are so many more shows that are still legitimately funny. Like, it's not like they are half comedy, half drama or whatever. There's shows that are funny that just don't feel the need to do the laugh track thing. There's a lot of them that I will, like, laugh my butt off, but it doesn't do the laugh track.
See, I have that thing too. Most of the shows I think of that are comedy shows on television, not necessarily sitcoms, that I laugh the hardest at, of course, don't have a laugh track. Archer comes to mind for me. But I don't know, like, you say that the laugh track, and I definitely get the sentiment from people that the laugh track is somehow cheap, or it's not genuine, it's just trying to, you know, like, hold the audience's hand or something. Maybe, but at the same time, laughter is infectious, and even if a joke's really stupid, you're more likely to laugh at it if you hear other people laughing. I do think that's fair. And so, yeah, it's totally disingenuous, and there's not actually people there actually laughing that hard at the joke. But, like, how much of like, filmmaking does that really affect, you know?
Right.
Like, the entire prospect of everything in filmmaking is disingenuous when you really think about it. It's all fake. So, yeah, you could maybe say it's manipulative, but I fail to see how it's more manipulative than something you'd see just... It's more manipulative than anything else in film.
Yeah, and there's also, like, there's different, I guess there's different levels. Like, I mentioned How I Met Your Mother earlier. There's a video online that I actually watched last week right after we finished recording our topic about Rat Race. And it's like 5 or 6 different scenes from How I Met Your Mother throughout, like, 4 or 5 different seasons. And it's the same audio laugh track. Like, it's not even different laughing. Like, you can pick out this distinct laugh in, like, several different scenes throughout the season. So it's like they just recorded a few people laughing, and for all we know, this laughter could be decades old, and then they're just throwing it in there. And it's possible that, like, we, the audience, are laughing more because we're hearing people laughing. But whenever I hear that, when I watch that video and it's like, oh, wow, they're using the same laughter throughout this entire series, that does, to me, make it seem more artificial. But then I look at something else like Friends, and maybe they're doing the same thing on Friends. I don't know. But, like, in Friends, I was watching some clips earlier tonight, and there was a scene where Chandler, he messed up, and he accidentally reveals that Ross is in love with Rachel, and then the audience is genuinely laughing. Like, it sounded so different to me. Like, I could hear, like, it wasn't just, like, cue, like, the neon sign that says laugh now, and then people are like, ha ha. Like, there was someone, like, you know, almost snorting with laughter in that laugh track, and someone else was like, oh no. Like, they said it under their breath, but you could kind of hear them saying, like, oh man, Chandler just stepped in it now. And, like, you can also see in that case the actors are almost having to adjust their performance while they're waiting for the laughter to die down. And I think sometimes that's why I'll start laughing more whenever I see that the actor is not immediately responding to something that one of the other actors said, because there's laughter going on still. And then that will make me laugh because they're prolonging, not necessarily a tense moment, but a funny moment, and making it funnier by prolonging it. Yeah,
I think that's fair. I guess I think of, like, you know, seeing films in the theater, like, I don't know, Avengers comes to mind with the infamous Loki and Hulk scene, right? Where, you know, Loki tells him off and it's like, I'm a god, and then Hulk just fucking wrecks his ass. I think of just how much my audience cracked up seeing that, or literally any scene in Thor Ragnarok, to be honest with you. Like, I just remember how much my audience cracked up seeing those moments happen on film. And, you know, it just creates this interesting dynamic where you're left with, like, yeah, the audience infects each other with laughter and makes what might just be a funny moment even funnier. And so, while it might be more genuine when it's an actual audience laughing at a thing, you run the risk of, I guess, if you do actual live audience in sitcoms, and you have a joke, and it doesn't get a big laugh, then the fact that, like, only one or two people might laugh in the audience is going to make the joke feel really flat. And, like, it, you know, whether or not the joke was any good, it can make a joke feel worse if only one person laughs, or if they leave a beat for a laugh and no one laughs. Because, like, especially if it's, like, a kind of a sour joke, and the actor decides, all right, well, I'm gonna give them some time to laugh, or pause for some time to laugh, and then no one ends up laughing. Well, shit, now it's even worse. So then they have to go and do a retake where the actor doesn't get a pause, and then you've just killed the whole mood of the audience watching, right?
Yeah.
So I think that the laugh track, I'm not going to defend it as like some kind of great tool of cinema. Or television, whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to say I think people make a bigger deal out of it than it deserves to be, because I could see the appeal in using it for a television series where you got to produce hundreds of episodes long term, whereas I don't think it's as excusable in something in a much tighter format like a film, where you've got an hour and a half. If you can't keep people laughing at your jokes within an hour and a half, then it is really inexcusable.
Right.
So that's kind of what I go to. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think shows that don't use a laugh track or a live audience, for that matter, are funnier? Sitcoms in particular.
I'm going to lean towards yes, but I want to leave room for myself and say that there are some that use a laugh track that I do think are pretty funny also. But I think a lot of, like, what I'm going to call the post-laugh track shows, I think are really funny. You mentioned Archer. There's another show with the same voice actor who does Archer, and I can't remember his name.
Bob's Burgers, H. John Benjamin.
Yeah, Bob's Burgers. I like it quite a bit, and I know you and I have talked about it a little bit before. I think it's really funny. It's one of those, it starts off, like, I went back recently and rewatched season 1, and it's somehow even quirkier in season 1 than it is in, like, later seasons. Like, I think it's kind of mellowed out a little bit later on, but it's still just really funny. And it's like, it's somehow, I don't know. I mean, this will just turn into me just talking about Bob's Burgers, so I'll just, but I think, like, a lot of newer shows that have done away with the laugh track, I think they realize that they can still be pretty funny. And even if it's something where, like I can watch through an episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and then there may be a joke that I didn't laugh at the first time I watched the episode, but I laugh at several other points, and if I go back and rewatch it, then I may catch something I didn't before, and I'm laughing at that quite a bit more than I was the first time. But I think in general, I'm leaning towards, I think that shows without the laugh track are funnier.
That's fair. I tend to agree more. Like, you suggested this topic of the evolution of sitcoms, and I started to think of, like, what sitcoms I actually watched, and what I would even classify as a sitcom. I started to get really meta with it, because I'm like, does Archer count? Does Scrubs count? And, like, I think this will be an interesting time transition out of the laugh track discussion and just talk about sitcoms in general, like what qualifies as a sitcom. But, like, I really like the show Scrubs. Yeah. And it's not what you would traditionally think of as a sitcom, because sitcoms you tend to think of, quote unquote, like family. There's a guy just talking. Oh, real quick, Lowe's joining the show.
Okay.
Yay, Curious Lowe. She's coming in any minute now. Hey, Lo, how's it going?
Good.
Hello.
Thanks for
Hi.
literally last minute joining.
Who is this?
This is Comics Kid 2099, Ruben DeBoard.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I don't think I've ever spoken to either of you before, although I do recognize the screen names.
Yeah,
No, it's
I've
just
seen,
it's one person. I'm pretty sure you've spoken to me.
Well, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. You said two names, so I thought there were two people there. I did not realize that the screen names were the same person.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, Lo, thanks for joining us. We were looking for someone before the show, and no one messaged me back until after we started, so Lo's just joining in the very early stages of the show tonight. Thank you, Lo.
Hi.
Anyway, we're talking about sitcoms, and I was trying to think of like shows that I watch that I would classify as sitcoms, because I don't think comedy is just enough. I think it has to have something else to it. But at the same time, a lot of people think sitcom and they think like, you know, family, suburbs, kind of like dynamic and stuff. And it's usually the dad that's the funny character. But I was like, a lot of the shows I enjoy, I would almost classify as a sitcom just really broadly under situational comedy, like Scrubs and Archer. I would argue that those are sitcoms.
Yeah, I don't think I ever would have necessarily said Archer right off the bat, but it certainly is situational comedy.
Mm-hmm.
I think mostly when I think of sitcoms, it's like the status quo, for the most part, is always exactly the same episode to episode. There doesn't really tend to be over-season arcs. That's not like 100% of the time, but I feel like in general, that tends to be the rule, that it's very like you can sit down for any episode and you know what's up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. And so that kind of creates this interesting thing. So I was trying to think of sitcoms I liked, and I realized that a lot of the things I like either barely qualify or are just not in the regular wheelhouse. So like I'll go through a couple that I really enjoy that are closer to the wheelhouse, and that would be like Frasier. I liked the George Lopez show for quite a while. And My Wife and Kids was a pretty good one for me as well. How I Met Your Mother, I liked until the last episode. So what are some that you two like? We'll start with Lo, since she's just joined.
Oh, yeah, just put me on the spot. I watched...
But you had like a whole 2 minutes to think of this.
I watch currently Modern Family and Last Man on Earth. I think those are probably the only two sitcoms. I guess Bob's Burgers. That's another one that's like currently on. It's hard for me to think of like a cartoon as a sitcom, but yeah, it totally is. And I watched probably everything that was on in the 90s. I was an obsessed little person with TV and everything. Like I'm going through like a random list of sitcoms. Like I watched Growing Pains, Sister Sister. Like there's just like a million different. Ooh, this lists Master of None, which I watch.
Oh, you just
certainly. What?
No, you're just looking through the list. I like it. It's good stuff.
Why not?
How about you, Ruben? What are some sitcoms that you either have watched or do watch?
I don't watch anything currently, but you mentioned Scrubs, and I do think of that as like 70% comedy and like 30% drama.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, each episode will have a heartwarming moment. Some will have like most heartwarming moment. Like, you know, there's an episode where, spoilers, Dr. Cox, one of his patients dies, and then like he's wrecked emotionally in that episode, and like the following episode, like there's some really tragic stuff in it, but like it's overall a comedy show, I think, and that just occasionally gets into like real stuff. And then there's like I've watched a little bit of Modern Family, you mentioned, Lo, and then I've watched some Brooklyn Nine-Nine. The Good Place, that's actually I guess the one that I'm watching currently.
The Good Place. I love that show. I can't believe I forgot that.
And it's weird because you mentioned how like, you know, stable status quo, things don't really change. Well, The Good Place is weird because it does. Like it's got a lot of it's very heavy in its own mythos. A lot of people have said it's the sitcom of Lost, or it's like Lost but for sitcoms, and if you like Lost, then let that get you into the show. If you don't like Lost, maybe give it a shot anyway. But it's really interesting. But Bob's Burgers, I watched the first 5 seasons, and then they took it off Netflix. But let's see. I watched Friends, and that's the one that I'm always kind of hesitant to mention that I like because I feel like that's kind of, it's almost like we were talking before you came on, Lo, about how like I feel like laugh tracks are kind of a thing of the past, and like that was really representative of shows from like the pre-2000s, and Friends is like right on that, like, you know, right on the fence of like that transitionary period. But I think that it's genuinely funny. I used to watch How I Met Your Mother. I actually gave up around season 7, I think, is when I just started to get sick of that show.
Okay. No, I mean, it's just interesting because you guys name all those, but like a lot of the comedies that I like again, Scrubs, Archer, those things are just very non-traditional, and I think sitcoms are very marked and set in their time. Like, it's weird to try to go back and watch like TV Land episodes of fucking I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched, because just like all of the 60s and the problems with the 60s are contained within those series. And so like there's a lot of sitcoms I feel don't really stand up to time. What is it? All My Children? Or no, that's not it. What is it with Archie Bunker? Is it All My Children? Fucking those were the days. That whole shit. Like, that show is weird to go back to and watch because, like, Archie Bunker is...
Oh, that's All in the Family?
All in the Family, thank you. Archie Bunker's, like, a bigot. He just is, like, very casually racist. And, like, they act like that's just totally a normal thing, which, back in the day, yeah, just having casual racist hang-ups was a thing, and no one really, like, that was just a thing. That's the whole, it was a different generation thing. But it doesn't hold up today, so it's like, it's very set and cemented in its time, because Archie Bunker's the fucking villain of, or the bad guy in an episode in a modern sitcom. And they're just tropes and stuff that are like, they're very just set in the time in which they came out. And that's not universal. I mean, I remember watching Nick at Night and watching, you know, The Jeffersons. And I quite enjoyed that series. But I feel like a lot of the things I like sitcom-wise either barely qualify or are doing something exceptional to the others. Because I don't like Friends. I think Friends is pretty boring. Like, I'll admit, if I watch an episode and there's a funny moment, I'll probably laugh at it. But I've seen episodes of Friends, and I never had any investment in the characters or cared about where they were going, and I just found it all to be very typical and kind of annoying at times. So I'm kind of the weird guy here on sitcoms, I guess. I don't like Modern Family. I don't like a bunch of sitcoms, to be honest.
I wouldn't say I like Modern Family. I just started watching it and now I haven't stopped. I don't hate it, but it's just like, I don't know, I think this is probably kind of a staple of sitcoms too, is that it's just something you can like put on in the background and not really think about. I don't know how well this fits into the whole situational, like, everything is always the same status quo, but like I'm always rewatching Parks and Rec, like, constantly. Because it doesn't really matter what episode you come in on. You just, you know, kind of what the characters are, and it's more about being familiar with their surroundings and the character quirks, so that when they do something, you're like, classic this person.
Yeah, and I think, like, The Office, not the Steve Carell version, but that's obviously the popular version, but Ricky Gervais's The Office, I feel, kind of turned a lot of things on its head, because it was the first, like, mock reality television format, and just use it for character growth, because, like, it didn't make any sense in The Office, because there's no gimmick at which point they acknowledge that there are cameras there or anything.
Yeah, there is.
Oh, there was in the very beginning?
The last season is weird AF.
Okay. Well, I just remember, like, initially there was no, like, explanation where they were actually acknowledging that they were being filmed.
No, there wasn't at the beginning.
Okay. And Modern Family has done the same thing, where it'll just cut to what we do in reality shows, where the, like, people, I'm gonna just call them characters, but where their characters will just talk to the camera, and, like, Gervais just started doing that in The Office as a way to increase comedic beats and timing, and that carried over to the American version. And so it's just this weird thing that has just kind of naturally become accepted, and you don't think about it, but it's weird because the characters are in a show and they don't know that there are cameras there. I don't think, especially in Modern Family, like there are scenes where, like, couples are about to have sex on screen and stuff, and so that's weird for them to do in front of cameras.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I think with Modern Family, what they do is, in a situation like where Claire and Phil are about to have sex, like there's no cameras there. It's just the audience. But then there are times where Phil is talking to the camera, and in that case, there's a documentary crew there. So it's like, it's a sometimes thing, I think, and maybe Lo can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it's different from, like, The Office, where there's always a camera. And Parks and Recreation was kind of, they fudged it a little bit, because early on, you would have, like, for example, like, Leslie is telling the camera people about how she put, what was it? She put, like, jelly beans or something, or she put artifacts in the hole that she didn't want something to be built there. I don't remember, but and then she's
like late in the show.
Okay, yeah, that was, I don't remember. I've only seen through the whole show once.
They were candy penises, by the way.
Okay, that was it. I knew there was something penis related. But
there's the quote of the episode. I knew there was something penis related.
But, like, she'll be talking to the camera crew, and she'll be laughing, and then she says, "Oh no!" Like, she realizes she's done something wrong. But then, like, sometimes some characters don't seem to act like there's, I don't know. They kind of play it both ways on Parks and Rec, and that's incidentally another show I really like quite a bit after season 1.
Yeah, and, like, so that's a weird twist on what sitcoms have become, and now, like, everything does it. You know, it's just, it's weird. Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Parks and Rec, The Office, like, all of those shows do this whole fake reality show thing, and that is just the most bizarre format change for me.
For at least for Modern Family, I don't feel like they're supposed to be on a reality show. I feel like they've taken that talking head, which is what those are called when they're, like, just sitting talking to the camera. I think that for Modern Family, it's more supposed to be inside their heads, like, because oftentimes they're talking, they're, like, you know, they're in a completely different space talking about something that's currently happening as if it's currently happening, because they'll say things like, you know, they'll react to what has just happened in, quote, real life, and then talk about it. So it's almost like that storytelling device has evolved from, you know, we had The Office, and then where it was very much aware that, like, this is a camera crew. They acknowledge it a few times, especially near the end of the show. And then we get to Parks and Rec, which sort of acknowledged it at the beginning, as in, like, Leslie would talk to the camera a lot more, but then it sort of started to evolve to more just talking heads of them reacting to things that were happening. And then I think Modern Family kind of, I mean, I guess they probably were happening concurrently, but, like, Modern Family seems like it's just taken it totally to this weird kind of, like, this is, you're just getting the characters' reactions to things, and that's a way to create different types of comedy.
Yeah, it's just an interesting little evolution of a device, but, like, you think about it for 2 seconds, it's like, this is kind of weird that they're doing this. All right, so, like, other things with sitcoms, though, I do want to get back to the idea that, like, they don't have much staying power. Like, if you didn't experience it when it was running, then going back to it is weird. Because I remember, like, I was a kid, and I'd stay up late, and my dad would be, like, watching Nick at Night or whatever, and like, I Dream of Jeannie or Bewitched would come on. And, like, I was too young to question it, but I tried to go back and rewatch them, and I'm like, man, this is very pre-women's lib. Let's just put it that way. It's just, yeah, how may I serve you, my husband? Oh, good. Oh, please continue. This is beautiful to watch. So, like, just stuff like that, it's weird. So do you think that, like, modern sitcoms will eventually start to have the same problem, or do you think that we've kind of become more aware of issues like that?
I don't know. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking, like, I think most shows, they're not going to worry too much about dating themselves. But like we were talking about The Good Place earlier. I think that's one. Now, it's early to say it right now because they've only aired 2 seasons, but that's a show, without spoiling too much, it's a very timeless show. There's nothing in it that really sets it in a particular point in time. So I think that's one, in theory, 10 years from now, I could show it to somebody who didn't watch it when it came out, and it could probably still be pretty enjoyed then. But I was... I'm gonna say maybe you're right, but like I'm thinking of like Frasier is one right now. It seems like on Twitter a lot I will see people talking about how like younger people are now going back and watching Frasier and Cheers, people who weren't watching those shows when they came out, and I don't know why, because I've watched just a handful of both of those shows, and while I like Frasier more than I like Cheers, I don't know what it is that appeals to younger people who are younger than all of us here in this Skype chat, people who like what it is about those shows that they enjoy now in the 21st century.
Well, I'll just tell you that Frasier is perfect. Frasier, for my money, is the most perfect sitcom ever, and we should never make another one. Like, it's just every character goes through such a fantastic arc over 9 goddamn seasons. It is forever long, and it just really, really does a lot to carry characters through. It's also one of the most just generally positive shows with, like, actual healthy relationships that don't accept the failings of their family members, but actually push each other to be better. Like, Niles goes from being this kind of creepy stalker guy to, actually getting his life together and then and then properly getting together with Daphne, as opposed to just kind of, creepily being in the background all the time or whatever. Like, he starts off as a trope, but then kind of becomes a more actualized person. Martin and Frasier's relationship is really fantastic as they grow much closer than they otherwise had been. Once Martin moves in with Frasier, and then there's just like 9 season long running jokes like that fucking chair. There's like from episode 1, Frasier hates his dad's chair, and he wants him to get rid of it, and he wants him to use like this, what he calls the lounge. It's like a really fancy recliner. And Martin doesn't want to do it, he doesn't want to do it, he doesn't want to do it. And like, it gets so ridiculous that at one point in the series, Frasier accidentally like drops something on the chair that sets it on fire, and as he's trying to knock it out, like, for some reason it goes over the fucking balcony and gets completely destroyed. And that pisses his father off big time because he feels like he did it on purpose. And so Frasier goes to the lengths of finding the original manufacturer of the chair, forcing them to admit that they made it because it's that goddamn ugly, and then having them recreate it from scratch. And then in the final episode of Frasier, once his dad is moving out to go be with his new wife, they're like, oh, I'll just sit here in the lounge for a minute. And his dad sits down and goes, wow, this is really nice. I could get used to this. He just looks so defeated because he spent 9 years fucking around with this stupid ass ugly chair that like totally ruined his whole apartment's like vibe. And so it's this really healthy and positive and encouraging environment that all the characters go through without being overly cheery. It feels natural, but it's also evolving the characters, which is just what makes it such a good show. At least from my perspective. I don't know what other people like about it, but that's the thing that I enjoyed.
I've never seen Frasier, so no comment.
You should start watching Frasier.
Yeah, I'll look into it. But also, you remember that I have a 10-month-old son, so I don't exactly have a ton of time on my hands.
Excuses.
Yeah. I mean, that being said, I did watch for the first time all of Friends last summer, but he was a lot younger then.
Yeah. See, I never got into Friends. So I don't know why Frasier seems to have like this resurgence. I'm waiting to see if they do a reunion episode of Frasier and how weird that'll be. But I don't know why Frasier has this resurgence, and yet something like, again, All in the Family is just very dated, to say the least.
What was the one, Pal to the Moon, Alice?
The Honeymooners.
That's another bad one.
Yeah.
Really, like, and fortunately I don't see a whole lot of people who are post-middle age, like, reminiscing on social media about, hey, remember the good old days when these shows were on TV? Fortunately, I'm not seeing a whole lot of that. I think people are realizing, like, that was really crummy, like, atmosphere for these shows to be remedying or like, reveling in.
Yeah, and I think what it is a lot of sitcoms, like Lo mentioned earlier, are kind of just there to be on, and they kind of just portray a pretty interesting little snapshot of the culture as it existed while the show was running. And so, like, cultural problems kind of just eke into the show, and the writers aren't even thinking about it, because I don't think a sitcom is anybody's magnum opus as far as writing, for television. I think sitcoms are just kind of things that writers, they come and they go on, and they just put in their 2 cents and move on to something bigger. And so, like, sitcoms tend to be very samey, and I don't want to say lazy, but they definitely, they don't...
Well, because it's on purpose. It's not like they're just doing the same thing over and over again because it's easy. And I mean, I'm sure that's part of it, but also because it sells, and they know their audience is usually people that are, especially like the 90s and before, it's people who are sitting down at the same time every week to see what, good old so-and-so is getting into this week. And that sells, and so they had to work with that. And I think that's also part of the reason why the formula is starting to change a little, because the way that we experience TV, especially our generation and generations younger than us, are experiencing TV very differently. We're all moving to binging and watching whenever we feel like it. We don't have to sit down at the same time every week to see a show. I honestly could not tell you what day of the week any of the TV shows that I watch are on. I just check Hulu, or I check, the CW TV app, and like, I kind of am like, I think that this show was on last night, and sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong, and it's a very different world that we're living in as far as media consumption. So I think that can be part of the way that we've sort of moved away from that very classic, everything is exactly the same, and we're starting to see things like The Good Place, where it just completely changed its status quo at the end of season 1, and then it did it again at the end of season 2. And I'm so excited for season 3.
Well, let me ask you this.
That would have worked 10 years ago.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that there's something to be said with all the revivals of sitcoms that we've had? Roseanne, Fuller House. What else has been revived lately? I know there's a couple of others. They've been bringing things back.
They did Girl Meets World, which was a revival of Boy Meets World, and it was fucking amazing. And I'm so mad that they canceled it. But all the other ones are dumb, and I'm even embarrassed that I loved Girl Meets World because it was on the Disney Channel. Shut up.
It's cool. Like, that was one. It's just weird. They've been reviving these old sitcoms, and I don't know why.
I never watched any of those. So I never watched Roseanne. I never watched Well, I watched like scattered episodes of Full House, but you were talking about how like sitcoms have a certain disposable nature to them. That was very much the case for Full House with me when I was younger. Like I cared so little when they announced that Fuller House was going to be a thing. And then, because even when I was like 8, my favorite characters were Uncle Joey and Uncle Jesse. And then Fuller House, like, completely does not have them. So it's like, okay, my interest level was like 3%, and now it's at 0%. So like all the shows that they're reviving are shows that came out before I was of sitcom watching age. So if they said they were going to do a Friends reunion, I'd be on that in a heartbeat. I don't know if it would be any good, but I'd be very interested. But like that's like the oldest sitcom that I'm interested in, and that started in '96. So like I don't even think of that as being that old. But yeah, like what was the other one you meant? Girl Meets World or Boy Meet? No,
yeah.
Well,
it was called Boy Meets World, and then the revival was Girl Meets World.
Right, and I never watched either of those either. I didn't even hear after the first episode of Girl Meets World. I didn't even hear much about that one.
It was good. I liked it. I mean, I'm sure maybe if you guys watched it, you would be like, "Well, this is super dumb." But it's also like it was on the Disney Channel and very much geared towards like current teenagers or like preteens, and then like people who were obsessed with Boy Meets World. They did a lot of like, here's this character back from 20 years ago in Boy Meets World, which I'm sure a lot of these shows do because they're definitely thriving on the whole nostalgia kick that our society is into right now.
Yeah. I don't know. It's weird because I remember watching episodes of Boy Meets World, and like that dude has just spent his whole fucking life on television at this point. It's kind of ridiculous. Because he started out as like fourth grade or some shit, and then he got all the way through high school. They revived the series again when he was in college, and then they brought him back when he's an adult with a child. I'm like, Jesus, this little dude's whole life is on television. Will and Grace is the other one that got a revival. I was trying to remember it.
Yeah.
Like, it's just that's amazing that, like, and sitcoms do have that because they tend to run for years, so you have people just grow up and live their whole lives on screen, which is another weird thing because then that tends to fuck kids up for some unknown reason. Can't imagine why. Like, I don't know, it's weird the way that they work, and it's weird to see things coming back, and I just can't quite put my finger on why so many shows are being brought back.
I mean, it's a little bit of laziness, I think. I mean, part of it is that I'm sure that, when you work on a TV show that's that successful and runs for that long, everybody involved, usually, they don't all hate each other if it's gone on that long, I assume. And it's a steady paycheck, which is not guaranteed in Hollywood, especially if you've moved on to movies since then, and maybe your movie roles have dried up, especially if you are a female. As you get into middle age, you start to lose that, and like, hey, if you can all come back and play this character that you played as a teenager who's now grown up, I can absolutely see where the draw is in coming back for that. And also, I mean, I talked a little bit like jokingly, but I don't hate nostalgia. I don't hate like I said, I was super on board for Girl Meets World because I loved Boy Meets World. That was like my show growing up. So I get it for all of these other shows, like, something that's touched you and you grew up with. I understand people being into them and stuff. And I get, it's an easy cash grab and something that a lot of people are going to watch.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask you: do you think that there's the potential to like ruin the show for you, or do you think like no matter how bad a revival is, you're always going to be able to like go back to the original?
I don't know, man. I'm a Disney fan. I've seen so many shitty straight to DVD sequels of my favorite Disney movies, and they don't do anything to the original. It doesn't bother me when sequels are bad. Like, it's fine. You can just ignore it or not watch it.
Right.
I agree. Kind of getting away from the sitcom thing for a minute, like just movies and TV shows in general. Like if I hate the phrase when people say, "Oh, you killed my childhood." Like, have a better childhood then. Like, I was last year. I was watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Got through season 4 and then just kind of stopped. And like in my opinion, first 3 seasons are really great. Last 4 seasons not as good. And then like, it's just for me, like sometimes the original thing can ruin itself, like up to a point. And so you can just, for me, I can just watch the first 3 seasons as much as I like and enjoy it. But if they did a Buffy sequel right now, it would probably be bad. And I wouldn't have to watch it. I could just say, no, thank you. I'm just going to stick with the DVDs I have over there on my shelf. I think that bringing something back, you know, best case scenario, it's going to catch a new audience. Even if the new revival doesn't catch a new audience, there may be some 15-year-old right now who hears about this Will and Grace thing, and then they read up on it and say, wait, this was a show before I was born, and then they may fall in love with the old show, and that might be the best thing that could come out of a revival. So I don't think it has the potential to ruin anything. If you love the show enough, and then this revival comes out and you hate the revival enough that it ruins the old one, I'm going to question how much you love the old one in the first place.
All right. I think that's fair. It's just, I think, like, you know, we mentioned How I Met Your Mother, and that show was certainly problematic but enjoyable enough at times that I liked it. Going into the last season, I was actually really excited to see where this all ended up. And then, oh, well, can you mute your mic for just a sec? Thank you. And then at the very end, in the last episode, they, like, ruin the entire series and, like, make the entire series unfunny and unwatchable. And so I worry about something similar happening to other shows by reviving them, or in the case of Roseanne, I don't watch that show, but there have been some really interesting think pieces on Roseanne put out, and there's definitely the sentiment that Roseanne was fine for its time, but bringing it back now is kind of the worst idea ever, because they're trying to equate some very real and scary political issues as just more of the same political squabbling, and that's dangerous. And, you know, I don't watch Roseanne. I'm not going to have a ton of room to judge or say here. But that's an idea that I could certainly kind of get behind. So I don't know. It's just, it's interesting to risk, like, ruining the series that you spent a long time on and really did finish just to try to come back and, you know, get that extra paycheck or whatever. I also think of Scrubs. You know, I really like Scrubs. Scrubs is a great show, in my opinion. It's got its bad episodes, sure, but it's a pretty good show, in my opinion. And then they brought Scrubs back for another season, and it was really bad. It was, like, unimaginably a poor decision, as they tried to just switch casts out.
I will mildly disagree. I think that I think if you just looked at it as its own thing, it was a fine show. The problem was that it was called season 9 of a show that already had 8 seasons. So, like, a lot of people missed Carla and Elliot and JD for part of that. You know, JD was there for a little bit, and so people like those characters. And when you spend 8 years falling in love with that crew, and then suddenly all you have is Turk and Dr. Cox. Like, I like Turk and Dr. Cox, but I miss the other guys. And it took a while to warm up to the new characters. But personally, for me, by the end of that season, I had warmed up to a few of the new characters. I don't even remember any of their names, but, like, Dave Franco's character by the end, I thought he was really funny, and they could have gone some interesting places with him. The other main guy, the one who was sleeping with Denise, I thought he was interesting. But again, like, I think people, and you know, I don't want to say people didn't give it a chance, because that's a show that lasted 9 years. But I think it's just one of those things where a couple of the main actors wanted out, and then a couple other people thought we can still milk it for a little bit more, and then they took a gamble and they lost. But, you know, I wouldn't say it was a failure. It didn't work out as well as they liked, though.
It probably would have worked better if they had it as, like, a spin-off.
Yeah.
If they had toted it more as, like, hey, see, there's a couple characters you recognize, and, you know, sold it more on the new characters. But yeah, it was I agree with you that the 9th season wasn't, like, awful. It was just, it played with expectations that I think people got disappointed.
I just remember Stephen Colbert doing a whole bit when they announced it, and he was like, Scrubs' last episode was called My Finale, and ended with video of the cast and crew hugging each other. Mm-hmm. What is this show going to be? And I couldn't really get that out of my head as I was watching. I'm like, yeah, this was just a poor decision. Especially because after a show runs for a long time, there's usually, like, this really heartfelt ending. Like, sitcoms, as problematic as they could be, they do, like, usually have really good endings. Like, I think of the Fresh Prince. Fresh Prince has a great ending as Will is just in the mansion one last time, like, knocks on the wall twice, turns off the light, and walks out. That is just... Oh, that is so powerful. There's a lot of stuff like that. Like, sitcoms tend to really think through and do smart endings. Like, what was it? Home Improvement had a pretty good ending. Like, as Tim's deciding how they're going to move their whole fucking house. And, like, that was... Not move everything in the house, move the house. Which is just completely in line with who that character was. I don't remember the ending of the George Lopez show. I never got to stick around for that one, but just a lot of stuff like that. Like they really put a lot of thought into these endings because, you know, the characters and the actors have spent so long doing it that I just really question the hell out of the revivals and reboots or additional season stuff. I always think those are really strange to see. And then, to be fair, I don't like Roseanne, or I don't know enough about Roseanne to like it or dislike it, but to be fair, doing a revival of Roseanne, probably not the worst idea, given that pretty much everyone that likes that show agrees that its final season was awful. It's like, it was all...
I didn't watch it, but haven't they brought back a character that died?
Yeah, like, they had to reboot and basically just write the last season out of continuity, I think, because, like, the last season was Roseanne and her family wins the lottery, but that wasn't going over well with people, so... They like make it a finale where it turns out the whole lottery season was just her writing stories because she was coping with her husband's death. That's just really fucking bizarre. So yeah, I don't know. It's just weird to me.
Well, let me ask a question. Ian, you were saying earlier that Friends is like very average and very mundane and normal. And I was thinking of a show that's like the opposite, and you were saying that like you just didn't latch on to any of the characters. And I was thinking of Community. And I don't know if you guys ever watched that show.
Mm-hmm.
I love Community.
See, I really loved it for like the first 2.5 seasons, and then I kind of got out of it, and then I got back into it, but I didn't watch everything. So like that was one, like the first episode gave me this premise, and I thought, okay, that's a really interesting premise. And then you watch, and then you're watching like episodes in season 5, and I'm feeling like they didn't really live up to the premise they gave, but it still was interesting enough. Like, I thought some of the episodes were incredibly interesting, but then sometimes I felt like the characters were really bland. Well, not bland, but they tended to repeat character arcs where they never really learned what I thought they were supposed to learn in episodes. So I was wondering what you guys thought of that. Like that.
I could talk so much about Community. I've like had like in-depth discussions about it. It's also like, it's so stereotypical for like the geek community to get very into Community. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't want to be that person, but at the same time, I really, really loved that show. And it was such a masterful exercise in postmodernism. And again, that sounds so douchey, but like, I loved how they took, because the first season was pretty paint by the numbers. There were some like dashes of that kind of like irreverence, but then they kind of really hit their stride in season 2, which I think happens a lot with shows. You know, you kind of
doing a bottle episode.
Yes, it's so good. Like, and as somebody who has grown up as just a massive fan of media in general, especially visual media like movies and TV, it was just like absolutely my brand of cocaine. Like, I loved to just every single week like watch whatever crazy shit they were going to get up to and how they were going to reference this movie or that movie or this type of movie. And I always loved the episodes where they were like, we're gonna do a war documentary, but it's just a pillow fort and a blanket fort, and everybody in this college is batshit crazy, and like, who cares? I don't know. I loved that show, but I've said my piece.
No, I agree. I just recently watched through all of Community because so many people at work are fans of Rick and Morty, and so like watching that and then finding out that Dan Harmon did Community really made me interested in it. And yeah, it's a pretty good show. By the time you get to season 6, you can tell Rick and Morty was just over the horizon because it starts to get like even more meta as fuck, which is pretty ridiculous. Did you ever see the Community board game thing that they did for the very final episode?
No.
Oh my god, that is the most bizarre shit. Where it's like it's Community the board game, and it's like it's shot like an old '90s board game commercial where they like talk about how to play the game and all this stuff. And then, like, the dad goes, haha, see, I beat you here, I locked you into this situation. And then the son goes, no, you didn't. And he pulls out the script for the Community, the board game commercial. He's like, I've got the script. And the father's like,
I do
what?
remember this now.
Yeah, the father's like, what? And he starts reading through the script, and he realizes it's the script for what they're in the middle of doing, and it just turns into this huge existential crisis. And he's like, you stupid child, don't you see that we don't even exist outside the confines of this commercial? We're not real people! And it's just like, that's so right out of Rick and Morty, it's ridiculous. But anyway, yeah, Community was weird as it kept trying to prolong itself, though. The whole 6 seasons in a movie thing really started to bite them in the ass, and even it, but like it's not even like I can really lodge that as a complaint against it because it was very aware that they'd overextended and overcommitted itself because what's his name Ahmed starts to Abed, yeah, thank you. Starts to like make the point that, oh, I don't know, other shows have gone for longer and come back, but they weren't bleeding characters like we are. And I'm like, yeah, you're right about that. It's like, it's really weird because I like Donald Glover and that's why I wanted to watch Community. Part of the reason I wanted to watch Community. And then he leaves and I'm like, oh, well, that's all right.
Since we've talked... Oh, go ahead.
No, I mean, just one more thing about Community. I forget, I think it was at the end of season 4. It could have been season 5. I'm sorry, there's another plane going over my house. I think it was at the end of season 4, though, that, like, I'm pretty sure it was Abed, too. He just goes, you know, it was really weird that everybody was acting so strange this season, but, you know, there was that weird gas leak, and if we get canceled, like, that's canon. And he looks, like, right into the camera.
Yep.
And says that. Like, it was just so funny and self-aware that, like, you know, there were moments where it was just a normal TV show where they were not aware of anything, and then other times they just dropped any pretense of a fourth wall, and it was great. Okay, I'm sorry, continue.
The gas leak was a reference. They mentioned it in season 5. It was a reference to season 4 because Dan Harmon was not involved in season 4. And
that's what it was.
That's one of those things I'm on the fence about because Dan Harmon sometimes comes across as kind of a butthead, but at the same time, he's a creative genius. So, like, I don't know if I should be, like, for or against him. And so, like, when he's, like, basically discontinuing season 4 and saying that it doesn't count, I'm like, I don't know. I didn't watch season 4, but I didn't watch half of season 3 or season 6 either. So I don't know if, like, I don't know. But, yeah, there are some jokes in that show where I'm, like, almost peeing myself. Like, there's one in season 5 where Abed mentions that Zach Braff was only in a few episodes of season 9 of Scrubs, and then he left. And then Troy says, after everything that show did for him, and Troy was leaving Community in that season. Like, he did.
Yeah, it was like Braff. 2 episodes later.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, like, Community would be so weird because, like, my favorite episode was the one Advanced Remedial... No, the one with the dice where they're the alternate dimensions.
Yeah.
Favorite episode, but then like that season also like started to peter out for me where I was, and then it was right around when I heard about the big falling out between Chevy Chase and Dan Harmon where I was like, I don't know if I can keep watching the show. Like if I keep watching, like I'm gonna have it in the back of my mind that those guys had this argument, and then I don't even remember what got me into season 5, but for some reason I skipped over what I hadn't watched and I just watched season 5. And I was still, by that point, it was a shorter season, and they had a lot more of the weird ones by that point, like you mentioned, Ian. Because season 1, you guys were saying it was like very paint by the numbers, and I agree. Like, there's especially in the first half of season 1, like there's a couple of like general like tropey subplots where it's like, oh, they're doing that thing. Like, there's an episode where Annie is trying to keep Troy from going on a date. And the whole time that subplot's going on, you think, okay, this is very typically what you see in any other sitcom. And then they kind of turn it on its head where Troy ends up getting to go on the date anyway, and her plans are just completely ruined. But like, I feel like season 1, it was just weird enough, but it was also just grounded enough that I was able to like, it was just perfect for me. I think season 1 and season 2 both. Because like season 1 had the paintball episode where like up until that point, it's just a normal, albeit pretty odd, like college show. And then the paintball episode, you're like, what am I watching? Like, if you come in on that episode, it's like, what have I gotten into? What is this show about? And then like by the time you get to season 5, there's a whole bunch of episodes like that. Like you've had the one where Abed is imagining everybody as a claymation thing. You had like 3 paintball episodes by that point. You had there was one where Jeff is having like a midlife crisis and he's imagining that he's living as a G.I. Joe cartoon.
It really does. Yeah, it gets very deconstructive and weird, and I think it's kind of like, it's interesting that we're reaching the end of the episode and we're talking about Community, because I feel like you initially pitched this as the evolution of sitcoms, and I think I'm just going to call this episode Sitcoms since we've talked about them so broadly. But like, I think Community is kind of the ultimate like culmination of what growing up on sitcoms will do to a person. And just, it's this really interesting introspective look, as messy as it gets, but it is this really interesting introspective look at what makes a sitcom, at the formulaic nature of them, at how they work, how they function, what they do, and then it like also kind of interestingly mirrors sitcoms, where it's really popular with some people and it's obscure to others, and then it goes through its highs and lows in ratings and viewership and viewer engagement. But there's obviously some pretty strong interactions between the different members of the cast, because the Rousseau brothers directed a number of the episodes of Community. I believe they were producers on it for a long time. And I didn't know that when the Rousseaus first started making Marvel movies, Winter Soldier and Civil War. So in Civil War, Abed is just one of the random SHIELD / Hydra agents working at the Triskelion.
The dean, he's also the dean at that college.
And in Civil War, the dean is a faculty member at MIT in the very beginning when Tony Stark is giving his whole speech. And what's more is, like, Abed at least played a different character. The dean is still playing the dean. It is just, it is identical. Like, you know, I'm sure there's the Community fan base and they've already picked up on this, and they're probably like, that counts as the movie. Right there. His appearance counts as the movie. Because it's just, like, that's obviously, these people are friends. They get along really well then, at least some of them. And so there's kind of a connection. You can tell that they're actually sticking together. You know, Dan Harmon's other show, really popular, of course, is Rick and Morty. And Rick and Morty has reused just huge elements of the cast. John Oliver was in season 1 of Rick and Morty. They've just popped up a whole bunch. It's kind of ridiculous. So yeah, that series is kind of, in a weird way, the ultimate sitcom, while like kind of being aware of and breaking all the rules of sitcoms whenever it feels the need to, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, and like, you know how like you'll have people who, like, if you watch Arrow, and then you have people who are like, they're rooting for Ollie to get with Sarah, and then you have people who are really team Felicity and Ollie, Olicity, I guess is what they call it. Like, people who are rooting for a certain group of characters to get together, and then Community plays with that and also turns it on its head. Like, if you watch the first episode of Community, it seems like they're hinting at Troy and Annie getting together. Annie kind of has a thing for Troy. Troy doesn't really know that she exists. And then they also kind of do a thing with Annie and Jeff, sort of, and then they do a thing with Troy and Britta, and then they do a thing with Britta and Jeff. Like, on the one hand, it looks like, when you first start watching that show, it looks like they're trying to do the thing that all TV shows do. And then they say, nope, we're not going to do that. We're just going to have every character sleep with each other, just about. Like, and then they just kind of ignore it. And I don't know if I like that or not, because on the one hand, that kind of thing is what gets me. It's what keeps me invested with any show over the long haul. Like, I don't know if I would have cared about Friends as much if you didn't have the eventual formation of the relationship between Chandler and Monica. Like, if you didn't have any of the characters ending up with somebody by the end of that show, I don't know if I would have cared as much. I think that was building these relationships was what kept me interested. And Community kind of toys with that, but then they're also not interested in that either. So it's the same way that you were saying that, like, it's the ultimate form of the sitcom, where it's doing stuff that old sitcoms used to do, but it's also playing around with it too.
Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting experiment in television, and with Dan Harmon seeming to get pissed off at Adult Swim for not wanting to order another season of Rick and Morty, I really wonder what he's going to go do next, because...
Well, he is doing a show with YouTube Red that's really good.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember he talked about that with the Game Grumps.
It's so funny. I love it.
But at the same time, whoever...
6 times.
Yeah, really? But at the same time, who's ever going to buy a YouTube Red account? I mean, really?
Me?
Really? You're a fool.
No, I love it. I mean, maybe I've just drank the Kool-Aid, but like, I enjoy that I don't have to watch ads without using an ad blocker, because FBI don't arrest me, but I use an ad blocker.
You don't have... there's nothing illegal about an ad blocker.
But, like, I like being able to support creators that I enjoy on YouTube without having to sit through a bunch of ads, which in some cases I use Patreon, but I also like having YouTube Red. And I literally bought, or I didn't even buy, I got like the 1 month free trial just to watch this show, because I like Dan Harmon and I love the Game Grumps, and I kind of fell in love with it. So I like kept it. I was like, oh, I'll keep it for like the month after that, just to, finish watching the show as it premieres, and then I'll cancel it. But then I just keep finding more and more shows that I like. Like, there's actually some good stuff on there. There's a lot of shitty stuff, but okay. I don't know. I've liked it. This has turned into a commercial for YouTube Red. I'm sorry.
I know. What the hell? You're putting the YouTube Red Kool-Aid out there.
Good Game is good, and it's definitely not doing any of this subversive stuff that Rick and Morty and Community did. It's much more paint by numbers.
Okay.
Anyway.
This isn't the show that they are playing Dungeons and Dragons, is it?
No, it's a show about like an esports team. Well, I mean, they're like misfits that form an esports team.
Because he did a thing on, I keep seeing it all over Facebook, where he and a couple of other people are literally just going through a Dungeons and Dragons campaign in front of a group of people. I think it's called Harmon Quest, actually, now that I think about it. And
that's a baby.
That was my son. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought I heard it on my end. But like, it's a thing, and it's like on one of those, like, you've never heard of this not even a network, but it's an online thing where you can pay for like a subscription through this channel, and it looked funny. I watched the first episode that was like for free, but it wasn't funny enough for me to want to pay more for it. But I thought maybe that was what you were talking about.
Mm.
No, I don't remember what it's called either, but I have like some friends that really like it, and I think I've seen a few episodes just at their house.
Okay. I don't know. Sitcoms are weird. I do tend to think of them as comfort food a lot of the time, and that's kind of just where my final thoughts are. They don't really have... I don't know, like, if we're really going to... If there's anything sitcom-wise that's going to be remembered long-term, like, 30, 40 years from now. But at the same time, they do certainly serve the purpose they're intended to, I think. And that's kind of my final thoughts. Ruben, do you have any final thoughts on sitcoms in general?
I agree about the comfort food thing. I think for me, a lot of times just media in general, I need something that's like easy to digest and something that's not gonna... I don't want to say that I like dumb things, because I like cleverly written things, but I need comedy. Like, I have a friend at work who's been encouraging me for probably half a year to watch Ozark on Netflix, and I watched one episode and like I felt like I was about to like have an anxiety attack. Like, I was I needed something more humorous just to like, and like I keep telling him like I'll get back to that show, but like I only watched like one episode of Breaking Bad and then I didn't watch any more of it, and so like I'm the kind of guy who just I need a cool down with like Friends or even something like Community where you have to think with a lot of those jokes, and that sounds really pretentious and I apologize, but like. I like something where I can just like sit back and just laugh at, like, it may be stupid or it may be clever, but I like the just going to something where I can just laugh and have a good time with it.
Okay. Lo, how about you? Any final thoughts on sitcoms?
My child is still crying in the background, so I'm sorry. But it's bedtime. Dad's having to put him to bed, so, you know, that's no fun. I was going to mention back when we were talking about Community, but I got derailed talking about YouTube Red. My son's name is Dean, and we say all of the little Dean jokes to him like, all the time. We'll be like Dean-a-ling, and like we also sing. God, what is the song that he sings? My name is Dean, and my hands are so clean. At this moment, I am stable. And we just change up the lyrics to that. We'll be like, your name is Dean, and your butt is so clean, because we're changing his diaper. Anyway,
that's adorable.
That has nothing to do with, what we're talking about.
I really hope that you got him like a little Dalmatian onesie, since the Dean had like the fetish.
Oh my gosh! And I'm super into Disney, if you didn't know that about me. And like, that'd be perfect. 101 Dalmatian. People will never know. His name is already so many layers deep, though, that I don't think he needs another, like... His middle names are Thomas and Dameron, after the Star Wars character.
Oh my God.
I didn't know that. Hey, here, I know we're getting off subject. You may not want to answer this. Is he named after the Supernatural character?
You know, he's not. I am super into Supernatural, but... I knew
that, yeah.
It's a family name. I don't need to go into it. It's my husband's middle name, and you know it goes back. I'm not gonna deny that I was super happy that like, because middle name Thomas also goes into Dean Thomas, which is a Harry Potter character. I put a lot of thought into his name.
Well, there you go. Do you have any final thoughts on sitcoms though?
You know, no, I don't need to derail this podcast again by probably getting way off track on some other topic that isn't sitcoms. I like them. They're fun. That's about what I have to say.
Okay, that's cool. All right, everyone. Next week, Steve texts me what he wants us to talk about for a review. So as I pull that text message back up, he says, Dimitri Martin's If I think that's a stand-up bit? I don't know. We'll see. Sounds like a good time, though. So join us next week for the next installment of Geeky Gentleman Comedy Month. Until then, I'm no. I'm a victim of circumstance.
I'm the Comics Kid 2099.
And I'm the Broadway one. I really need to think of something else because I'm never talking about musicals on here anymore.
We'll get you back for another musical. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
All right. And until next time, we are your Geeky Gentleman and Lady, and we will be discussing things.